Today is November 16th, 2024, at least it's the day that this video has been uploaded on, and today is actually a very special day. Because exactly 20 years ago today, a very special game came out that is still played and celebrated. And that game is called Half-Life 2. Oh, I don't actually own a physical copy of Half-Life 2, so you're just gonna have to pretend this game, this is Half-Life 2, okay? I'm a fake fan. When developing Half-Life 2, Gabe Newell gave the development team at Valve the task to create a revolutionary first-person shooter that the world has never seen before. He even gave the team a basically bottomless money pit to work with as well, even stating that he would fund it out of his own pockets if he had to. And he didn't even give the team a deadline. Man, I would love to work with no deadlines. What came out of this development period is definitely a job well done, despite the small bump in the road that it had. Half-Life 2 is still regarded as one of the best FPSs out there, one that still has influence on many games today, just like its original counterpart. In this video, we're going to have a look back at Half-Life 2. Does it really hold up? Or is everybody just wrong and it's actually more of a game from its time? Well, I think you might already know what the answer is, but let's find out anyway. LambdaGeneration. Okay, so before we get into the main meat of this video, let's talk about the brand new 20th anniversary update that came out for Half-Life 2 just now. I'm not going into too much detail here because I'm literally recording this at 3 in the morning on the day this video is going to have to go out. So yeah, if I sound a little bit tired in this segment, you now know why. Both Half-Life 2 and its deathmatch counterpart got updated for this anniversary. Half-Life 2 now has both episodes bundled inside of it, which you can access through the main menu. And Lost Coast is there too. The game now also has developer commentary added in from the original team, and there is official workshop support now too, making it easier than ever to upload and install mods for the game. Apart from that, Half-Life 2 got some pretty cool graphical updates. Pretty much every map has been touched up by Valve in some way, from the lighting to the way the props fade, to a brand new fog system and HDR in every map. It's pretty amazing to see this old game updated this way. Although when it comes to the lighting, I still think Half-Life 2 update does it better. Oh, and you can now turn on the classic effects that were originally in the game before the episode's released. So if you like the PNG fire that used to be in the game and the barely visible blood splatters, then go ahead and turn this little feature on. Yeah, I get it, it's nostalgic and all. I just don't think these effects are necessarily better. Alongside the update for Half-Life 2, we also got updates to Deathmatch. Some things that are fixed are the player model selection in the options menu. Some sound effects that were missing from the gravity gun are now added back. Prop placement and geometry has been fixed, and much more. For a full patch list for everything that this massive update did, go check out the new site. It's linked down below. But we didn't just get a game update, oh no. A new version of Raising the Bar is also going to go back in print in 2025, which is now going to include the episodes as well. Valve released some archive footage over on their YouTube channel as well in the best quality they've ever been, and there's a whole brand new 2-hour documentary about the game as well, produced by the same people that did the one for Half-Life 1. And I heard that there is some interesting Half-Life 3 concept art in there too, so you better check it out. Alright, and that's it for the update. There might have been stuff that I missed, but this video has to come out in a bit, so you can check the update out for yourself. Alright, now back to the original video. Let's talk about the story first. How does that hold up to today's standards? And in order to answer that, I think I would need to give you a recap of what the story of Half-Life 2 is actually about. Don't worry, I'll try to make it as quick as possible. In Half-Life 2, you follow our beloved, well-spoken protagonist Gordon Freeman as he's deployed by the G-Man to visit a city called City 17. Why is the city called that, you may ask? Well, it's because since the events of the first game, the Earth is now taken over by an interdimensional force called the Combine. Oh good! And City 17 is now part of many different cities that serve to house the remaining humans that still live since the invasion. And guess who's the boss of all this mess? Your old boss from Black Mesa, Dr. Wallace Breen. After meeting up with Dr. Kleiner, Alex, and Barney, who are all part of the Resistance, it is determined that you have to go to a facility named Black Mesa East in order to aid in teleportation technology research, so Resistance members can more efficiently move around the cities and the Rebellion bases. This isn't an easy task though, as you're being hunted by the Combine your entire trip. Once you're finally at Black Mesa East, you get to meet up with the leader of the Resistance, Eli Vance, who gets captured not long after because you basically led the entire Combine force straight to him. Good job. Now you have to make your way through Ravenholm, an abandoned mining town full of creepy Zen creatures and zombies, and eventually you make your way onto the highway that leads straight to Nova Prospekt, which is a Combine prison where Eli is being held. Once there, you meet up with Alex and find out that a scientist who has been working at Black Mesa East, Judith Mossman, has betrayed the group and basically helped capture Eli. So hey, I guess it's not entirely your fault, huh? Anywho, she teleports Eli and herself away towards the Citadel straight from under your nose, and now it's your task to get Eli back again and to potentially smack Dr. Breen in the face as well, because he deserves it. Since we get back from Nova Prospekt through a delayed teleporter, we notice that City 17 is now a war hole, and we're going to have to fight through all of this to get to the Citadel. Of course, we manage this and we get to confront Breen, who managed to capture all of us at this point. But luckily, Mossman does an Uno reverse card maneuver here and decides to help us get free instead. We go after Breen, making him have a freak accident with the teleporter he wanted to use to get away from us, and there you go. We won. Except this explosion happens, and the rest of the story gets told in the subsequent episodes. But those are not for this video. Now, for as much detail I left out of that description of the story, I really do think it holds up pretty well. Although I will say that the setting and the tone of the story are quite a bit different from the first game. You're no longer playing through a dingy science facility, but you're playing in a mostly open-air city and the surrounding areas. I think it's a nice breath of fresh air though, especially if you just come out of playing the first game. The way the story is told, I think, is also brilliant. Most games nowadays resort to showing major story details in cutscene, and while I think that can work too, there is an appreciation I have for Half-Life 2 and how it tells its story through gameplay. Just like in the last game, you're never yanked out of Gordon's perspective, and moments where you lose control over him are very rare. And when you do lose control over him, it's explained in the game why that is. Like you're being transported in these Combine lifts, or the G-Man is having some kind of monologue that he's holding you in place for. Even dialogue-heavy scenes where a lot of story is being told are not holding you back in any way. Okay, you cannot straight up leave the room, but there is plenty of stuff to play with usually in these scenes in order to keep your brain entertained. Especially in this day and age with attention spans not being as long as they used to be, this is great. Although I will say that these scenes can drag on a bit if you've played through them several times before, like me. The dialogue, exposition, and the characters are also very well written. There really aren't any unlikable characters in this game, to be honest. Even Alex, who serves as your companion much later in the game, is very likable and actually doesn't get in the way too much. Companions in games can be very annoying a lot of the time, so I really gotta applaud Valve for not making this, well, shit, I guess. So yeah, all in all, I would say that the story and the way that it's told holds up well. Now, let's talk about the gameplay here. Does that still hold up? Let's boil down to what it is first. In many ways, Half-Life 2 is a standard first-person shooter with some elements added to keep it fresh. And I think one of those elements is what is really going to help this game stand out even today. Let's talk about the weapons first though, because a first-person shooter has got to have good weapons, right? We got the crowbar, of course, which makes a return from the first game, alongside a 9mm pistol, a submachine gun, a magnum, the SPAS 12 shotgun, a Combine pulse rifle, a crossbow, grenades, and an RPG. I really love this selection because it really feels like no weapon goes unloved here. It's true that the beta had a much larger selection, but it felt unfocused, to be honest. My favorite weapons got to be the Combine pulse rifle and the SPAS 12 shotgun. I alternate between the two often. The shotgun for close range attacks and the pulse rifle for enemies a little further away. Works great. Shooting these guns feels alright. Although, personally, I gotta admit that this is not the game's strongest feature, and I'm afraid that this is where Half-Life 2 could feel a little bit dated among more modern shooters. It honestly just doesn't feel punchy enough, at least not for me. This used to be worse in earlier builds of the game though, where the blood particles seemed a bit more primitive. What does help a lot though are the ragdoll physics. Come on, there's nothing better than right-clicking a Combine soldier with your shotgun and seeing its bloody corpse be flung across the room. That does make everything better. Another thing I got to complain about when it comes to the weapons is the SMG and the sound that it makes. It's just way too loud, man. It's just an assault to the ears. But what's the point in having guns if you don't have any enemies to shoot? Well, luckily Half-Life 2 has plenty of those as well. You basically have two categories of enemies in the game. The Combine, with their several varieties, are a great opponent with powerful weapons and tactics to try and shoot you down. Those dang shotgunners can go to hell! And the Zen creatures are there for some nice variety from the Combine enemies. You now have different types of zombies to fight to make them a lot more challenging, and with that comes multiple different types of headcrabs as well. I thought it was always pretty cool how Valve expanded on them. And of course you have the Antlions as well that start off as an enemy to you, but later turn to allies as you obtain bug bait to help control them. I think the enemy variety holds up pretty well, all things considered. There really aren't any super tanky Combine soldiers though, something a more modern game would probably introduce. But you know what, I honestly think that's a good thing. I personally really don't like bullet sponge enemies. Okay, now let's talk about one of the most defining features of Half-Life 2's gameplay though. And that has to be the physics system. In the first game, you were able to push and pull objects when necessary. It was a pretty primitive system, but it was used for some interesting gameplay moments here and there. But Half-Life 2 really takes it up several levels by introducing the Havoc physics engine, and by littering the game's levels with physics props that you can interact with. Just playing around with these items and carrying them around makes the game a lot of fun to just screw around in. Later on, when you get the gravity gun, you can actually pick up heavier items and punch stuff across the level like you couldn't before, making these props that have been laying around the place weapons in and of themselves. Hell, the entirety of Ravenholm is essentially a physics playground. It's pretty awesome. And I honestly think that this is a gameplay element that holds up fantastically today. You really don't see many games anymore nowadays that do a lot with physics, huh? I mean, it's there, but it's rarely part of the gameplay anymore, even though it's so fun to play around with. You don't just toss around props and use them as weapons, though. Just like in the first game, there are environmental puzzles to solve. And these involve the physics engine as well. I think this is honestly great because this adds another dimension to the puzzles and it makes you think and play around a lot more with the environment than the previous game. The puzzles just feel very dynamic. And don't forget that apart from all that, we also got vehicle sections. Early in the game, you obtain an airboat that helps you cross the toxic waters towards Black Mesa East. This turns an otherwise long and dangerous journey into a fun day or so on the water. At least, for the most part. Then later in the game, you obtain a buggy to help you make your way to Nova Prospekt along the coast. Both of these sequences are pretty nice set pieces and a relatively good break from the running, thinking, shooting, and living. You can add driving to that tagline now as well. Along the way in both sequences though, you sometimes have to make stops in order to solve puzzles, shoot Combine soldiers, or to obtain supplies. This is a great way to just get out of the car every so often and to make these sequences less monotonous. However, I do wish these vehicles would control a little bit better. Maybe those controls haven't aged super well. The buggy controls are especially pretty stiff, making it difficult to make tight turns sometimes. At least both vehicles come with a Tau cannon though, giving you the ability to blast enemies with yellow lightning. Alright, I saved the best gameplay bit for last though. I think the best thing about Half-Life 2's gameplay is the movement system. It just feels so good to move in this game. From just walking and strafing around to jumping and even just moving the camera. It all feels super tight and it really makes you feel like you're fully in control. Rarely do I ever blame the game's controls for any mistakes that I make, so that absolutely still holds up today in my opinion. So is Half-Life 2's gameplay still good in modern times? Well, I think it could receive some tweaks here and there, but I definitely wouldn't say that it's outdated or anything. Some mods out there already aim to tweak the weapons and combat, like M-Mod. So if you're looking to give the combat a little extra punch, I'd recommend downloading that and giving it a try. So now let's talk about the graphics. How do they hold up? Alright, I gotta tell you something. All this time, you have not been looking at footage from Half-Life 2 at all. You've actually been looking at footage from Half-Life 2 Update, a slightly more updated version of Half-Life 2 with some graphical enhancements, like better lighting quality, environmental effects, and HDR. In order to stay true to what Half-Life 2's graphics actually look like when you download it from Steam right now, I'm switching over to showing you footage from the actual game now. And honestly, I think Half-Life 2's actual graphics are fine. Okay, now this might be a hot take, but I think that Half-Life 2 and by extension the Source engine graphically is starting to look pretty dated now. Now, don't get me wrong, when Half-Life 2 first came out back in 2004, these graphics were pretty amazing. The lighting looked great, there were reflections, and the levels looked alive with all the props and models everywhere, something that the first game definitely didn't have. One thing that was especially amazing at the time were the character models, especially the faces on these character models. They were realistically animated, and you could actually read the emotions of these characters just by looking at their faces and their body language. That wasn't super common yet at the time, especially not to this level. And I will even go as far as to say that these facial animations do actually, for the most part, kind of still work today. But yeah, the graphics of Half-Life 2 leave a lot to be desired in 2024. But you know what? That's not always a bad thing necessarily. Because while the graphics aren't that advanced, the system requirements are also not that high. Meaning that more people can actually run this game on pretty much any hardware out there right now. We here at LambdaGeneration have done many events where we ask people to send us pictures of their setups. And it's not surprising to see that a lot of people in this community do not have state-of-the-art hardware. And, well, that's not necessary. I bet you can play Half-Life 2 on pretty much anything out there right now. Heck, you can probably get it to run on a Chromebook if you know what you're doing. These graphics make the game accessible to pretty much everyone. And I feel like that is something we need to take into consideration as well. And all that being said, Half-Life 2 can still look pretty beautiful at times. It might not have RTX ray tracing yet, volumetric light, screen space reflections, PBR materials and all that, but it can still pull off some pretty impressive sights here and there. And then I haven't even talked about the nostalgia factor yet. Sometimes you just want to go back to a simpler time in gaming where you're not constantly blasted in the face with depth of field effects, lens flares, super bright suns, and bloom everywhere. For that, Half-Life 2 is kind of a perfect middle ground between the old and the new. So while Half-Life 2's graphics might not stand a chance with more modern games released today, I still think it looks pretty special. And it kind of still has its own thing going. And I can tell you, a lot of people still absolutely love the way it looks, including myself. And that is pretty neat. So, now comes the conclusion of the video. Does Half-Life 2 truly hold up after 20 years? I would say, yeah, it does. If you're willing to overlook the more dated graphics and some mad design decisions in the gameplay department, then you're still up for a treat today. It helps as well that Valve has kept Half-Life 2 playable and compatible throughout the years. Look at other PC titles like the older GTA games who are about as old, and you can tell that those games are in a much worse state than Half-Life 2. And no, we don't talk about the definitive editions for those games. They do not exist. Half-Life 2 doesn't need any mods to get running and basically just works perfectly fine out of the box 20 years later. And that is truly amazing. And if all of what I've mentioned in this video still hasn't convinced you yet, then let me just say one word that most likely will convince you. Mods. Half-Life 2 has a metric ton of mods that you can download and enjoy right now. From asset replacement mods to full-on brand new experiences that can extend your playtime into the hundreds upon hundreds of hours. Hell, look through the videos on this very channel and you can tell how much content there is for this game, all created by the community. And talking about the community, it's alive as ever these days with new people joining in every single day and with new projects being created frequently. Honestly, I created content around Half-Life and Portal weekly for around 6 years, and I genuinely had something new to talk about every week. That's how alive this community is. So in the end of the day, yes, Half-Life 2 holds up today. And if for whatever reason you haven't gotten into it yet, I really urge you to do so right now. Valve has probably updated the game for the 20th anniversary as well, something I know nothing about as I'm working on this video ahead of time. But if there is ever a time to dig into Half-Life 2, that time is now. So there you have it. Half-Life 2 really does still hold up to this day, huh? Or do you maybe think otherwise? Is there anything in this video you absolutely do not agree with? Or do you just want to discuss further? Leave a comment down below. Let's have a healthy discussion. Oh, and while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe and to ring that bell so you'll never miss another video. There's absolutely more stuff coming very soon. Oh, and I don't mention it a lot in these videos, but we have a community website that you can join for free. On LambdaGeneration.com, you can share your creations and discuss various different games with other community members. It is a whole lot of fun, and it's completely free. So be sure to have a look. You don't even need an account to browse. It's linked down below. Alright, that's it for me. Happy birthday, Half-Life 2. Here's to the next 20 years, which I'm pretty sure will go by even faster than the first 20. Salutations, and take care.
LambdaGeneration.